Lucy, you've been on the doors. You haven't. You have in the past. Alex, you've been on the doors.
Yeah.
So I want to hear, and I'll put them up here, and we could talk about each one specifically. But like common objections that you feel like you are ill-equipped to handle right now. So like it comes up, and you're kind of like dreading it because you don't feel super good or confident about actually moving through
I don't
it.
want holes on my roof.
No holes. Okay. So. No holes and roof. Beautiful. You're smart.
Think about selling
no
the
holes in
house.
roof. So that's one that you're running into that you feel like is
The
pretty
best thing I
difficult.
can say there right now is, it sounds like you just don't want to sloppy drop it, right?
Uh-huh.
And then
Yeah.
that's as
Yeah.
effective as
So we'll talk about that because there's definitely a way to tee it up to where like you're not just making them defensive. What other ones?
I'm thinking about selling the house.
Yeah, selling the house.
You're gonna have to go around on the other door because this one's locked, I think. What?
I'm thinking about selling the house.
Selling the house.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Okay. What else?
Yeah, I got one yesterday, and it confused me because he was like, he knew a lot about solar,
Yeah.
and he's like, I don't want to have to store it on the grid, and so I was talking about a battery, but he was like, no, like you still have to be intertwined with the grid.
Yeah.
with that.
Connected.
Yeah, and so I didn't really know what to come up with.
Okay. So like his concern is that he didn't want to be connected to the grid at all.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I won't write that one up here. I'll just talk about it really quick. So, that's illegal. So, like, people love the idea of being, like, off-grid and not tied to it. But if you live in, like, something that's not, like, within city limits, you can't just chop your line connection to the grid. Like, they just don't allow
How
it.
the fuck you can? I was Amish, you bastard.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm saying like here, right? Obviously, there are
Only the
situations.
city
So like, I
limits.
just bought some property up in some land up in Tennessee, like in the Smokies, and like out there, it's like off grid, right?
Yeah.
So like Amish communities, it's off grid. But like if you're just living smack dab in the middle of the neighborhood, you can't just disconnect with the grid. You can be disconnected and not have to rely on them if they ever get to a point where like, let's say that the grid were to fail. If you had batteries, in theory, you're like a self-sustaining thing, right? Which is cool, but like you're not disconnecting from the grid. So if somebody brings that up, I'll just help them understand, like, hey, we can definitely help you get. I just walk them through it because those people, sometimes they don't even realize that that's not even possible.
Yeah.
So,
He then
like-
started talking about like California and I don't even know.
Yeah. So those ones are just like the one-offs where you just sometimes just throw it to the wind.
So, the one that I get a lot is my bill is really low.
Low
And,
bill.
like,
That's good.
Yeah, like some people tell me the bill's like $45, bro. What do you want me to do?
Yeah. So you actually, if it's genuinely, let me walk through that one. So somebody says they have a really low bill. First step, figure out what that low bill looks like. Second step, if it sounds unrealistic, what are you doing?
Asking to see it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, wow, that's insane. Like, it doesn't even sound right. You're either lucky you're not using any power at all. Like, have them pull it up or whatever. But like, if it's $45, they probably already have solar. If they don't have solar, then they're lying to you.
I have a picture of a lady with a $35 bill with no solar. She just doesn't use her AC at all.
But like, there's a $25 connection fee,
Yeah.
which means that she's in that situation using $10 of electricity, which is like,
I don't know. I have a photo of
it's
it.
just no. Maybe it was 1 month,
Yeah. It was
and
just
like
one
other
month.
months she uses more.
It
But that's just,
could have been her first month then,
Could've
because
been
my
our
first month of my new place
There's a lot of
was
maybe
like
different
30
scenarios, but
bucks.
just like you could turn off your lights, turn off your AC, turn off everything, and you're still going to be using more than $10 of electricity a month. So those ones you have to dig a little bit because they're either lying to you or it's something that we
She
would
could have
call,
overpaid her last one too.
Yeah, you can if you put on too much, you can overpay on a previous bill, and then that'll roll over and cover your current one. So there's a lot of different situations. But we'll talk about the low bill. We'll start with these three. So I want to first kind of go over a good like blueprint or structure. So structure of like how you need to approach objections and smoke screens and like concerns when they're brought up. So I had, when I was out a few weeks back, I was knocking doors, and this dude, he answered the door, and he was like, yeah, I just don't want, it was the holes in the roof. He's like, I just don't, there's no way I'm going to be going and putting holes in my roof if I do this. I like the idea of it, like I'm a builder and everything, but I'm just not doing the whole roof, right? And before I could even do anything, he was like, and I know you have probably something that you have ready to help me feel better about that and overcome my objection. He literally said that. And he's just like, but then he continued with his objection and kind of solidified, right? And, the point being, like the last thing that we want when we're overcoming an objection is for the homeowner to feel like we're overcoming an objection, right? Because then it's just like, they have this concern. Obviously, let's make sure it's a real concern and not like a smoke screen, but if it's a legitimate thing, like typically some of these are, the first step is we have to get, and this is done through nonverbals and paraverbals, but we have to get on the same side as them. And so, Axel, do you remember like what the first step would be? And somebody, if they bring up one of these issues?
Agreed.
Yes. So, agree, right? So, we always have, especially if you've been here long enough to where you're starting to learn like good ways to overcome issues, you'll have like this memorized thing of being like, yeah. So, and then you get really excited because they say it. You're like, yes, I just learned this. And then you regurgitate what you just learned on how to overcome the objection. And homeowners don't want their objections overcome. They want to feel heard, right? And they want to feel understood. And so if we're just starting initially by just regurgitating some memorized thing that we're going to overcome it with, that's not a good start. And a lot of times what's going to happen is the homeowner will just dig their heels in even more and either double down on whatever that objection was or come up with another one, because now it's you versus them, right? You're trying to convince them why they're wrong and you're right, which is not what we want, right? So we have to, and if you actually pay attention when you're out there today, you'll realize you do this more than you think. Like, you just try to overcome it, and you have to resist that temptation. So the first thing is you want to agree, right? And on that, making sure that the eye contact is good, your stance is good, because a lot of times they're going to bring up that objection or concern, and we, without even realizing it, we just like rock back and we start fidgeting and we break eye contact. We speed up a lot of times, so like the speed of our tone is going to be a lot faster because we're a little bit apprehensive, and those things are just going to naturally happen, like in our speech patterns. And it is the homeowner, like if I were to go up to a homeowner after you would have that interaction and say, hey, why did you shut this person down? They don't really know. They're not going to be like, well, he started, fidgeting a little bit when I brought up this issue, and then he broke eye contact 3 times, and he speeded up in his pitch a little bit. They're not going to say that. They don't know, right? But those are all things that are going to be like, people pick up on subconsciously, right? And then they're going to respond according to that. They don't even realize what they're doing, but that's just human nature, right? So the first thing, before we're even doing anything, is if we're doing anything with our speed, we're actually slowing down more. So like, I've heard this a lot, but like people will come up with these concerns or objections, and we get so excited because we just learned a good way to overcome it, that before they even finish, we're already being like, regurgitating the way that we're going to overcome it. Yeah, totally. So what we're doing is completely different, right? And they just blah, 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 start like throwing up their overcoming, right? And so if anything, first of all, just let them get it out. Just let it happen. And sit there and just listen and nod and smile, right? Just let it happen. Let it flow.
So like, would you recommend like almost going deeper down the rabbit hole of their objection before giving your rebuttal? Like say like,
yes.
Like I don't want to host my roof, and I'll say something like, I wouldn't either. If I was a homeowner, I'm not yet, but if I was, I probably would think long and hard before putting holes in my roof, and then give the the rebuttal.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. So the first part is agree, but it's a little bit more like there's one more step to agreeing. Whenever there's empathize, right? Because one time I had. Do you remember Tarzan? Was he around?
Yes.
This kid, I can't remember.
I was
his
the one
name.
who recruited him.
Oh yeah, he was not good. We fired him. But
Aw.
That guy was.
yeah, well, he was better off somewhere else.
He said, "I agree."
I was like, dude, you
agree.
got to agree whenever somebody gives you an objection. So we came up and we did a role play, and I gave an objection. He's like, yeah, I agree. I'm like, okay, it's more than just saying I agree, right? There's more to it than that.
That's what he
And like this is the part where like you can say I agree. I don't say I agree. I'll say things like a lot more. It's in like my face, and my head nods. But like they bring something up, and I'm not rushing to answer it yet. I'm just kind of head nodding, smiling, listening, letting them know that I'm hearing them, right? And then I'll be like, yeah, you're actually 100% right. Like I hear you, like totally. And you can say agree, like yeah, I actually totally agree, right? You have to take it one step further, which is the empathize part, and that's where it's like I actually feel the same way. Like I don't blame you for feeling that way. They're not alone. So they are not alone. That's kind of the whole idea here. I was actually just talking to quite a few of the people on your street, and they mentioned the same thing. The big reason that they were holding off is because they didn't want blah blah blah. They didn't want holes in the roof, right? Or they had concerns about this. And you know, I actually don't blame you because obviously that would be a pretty big issue, and I would never even consider doing it either if, you know, the way that a lot of these companies are coming out and just like turning your roof into Swiss cheese, right? It's pretty crazy. So I agree. Like you're 100% right. I feel you, and I'm going a little overboard with this right now, but like that's kind of the idea of what needs to happen. So they're not alone. So you can even follow-up questions. This is what follow-up questions. What Devin's talking about, which is like before you even start to talk about potential solutions. Also, by the way, you'll realize once you start to get to this point, people will actually calm down and be more willing to listen to you. The second you start to overcome an objection, you trigger what's called psychological reactance, which is basically them, without even realizing it, just digging their heels in even more, right? Because what you're doing is being a stereotypical salesman. You're falling into the pattern that they are expecting, and you fall into that pattern and you are done, right? So, yeah, you'll notice that they start to, if you do this correctly and you're genuine about it, you'll notice that they'll start to like soften up a little bit and be more open to talking with you. Because they don't feel like they're getting sold at that point. And if they aren't opening up, it doesn't matter what you do, they're never going to hear anything, no matter how much money we're saving them, no matter how much their rate increases are going up. We need them to at least feel a little bit of trust and, you know, that we're listening. So then we're going to follow up with a couple questions. So examples of this would be like, so for holes in the roof. So yeah, for you it sounds like you just have issues with like potential leaks or kind of a, what did you say, a crappy job?
Sloppy job.
A sloppy job on your roof. Is your roof pretty new? Yeah, we just got it like after the last hurricane, so it's only a couple years old. Okay, so you also are probably concerned about, you know, voiding the warranty up there, things like that. And they're like, yeah, exactly. Like I don't want to put something up there and just void all the warranties and all this crap, right? So like having those follow-up questions is just gonna strengthen the idea that you're like, we're kind of on the same team, not me versus you trying to convince you why I'm right, with some follow-up questions, right? Then what? So potentially, so Axel said isolate. What isolating is it would be like the idea of saying, well, you know, and you can do this. It's a little bit more advanced and it's a little bit more like situation to situation based. But what isolating is doing is saying, so like it sounds like if that wasn't an issue, so like there was no issues with holes in your roof or voiding warranties, that other than that, solar is something that you would consider or have thought about in the past. Like that's the only thing. So you're isolating that concern. And sometimes the purpose of that, by the way, is if there is something else, we can get it out now rather than later. Or if that is the only thing, they just verbally committed that like, yeah, I actually like the idea of solar. Obviously, you know, rates are going up, all this stuff. I've looked into solar in the past. It's just that one thing that I can't get over, right? So that's what isolating is. I could put that up here. I would say, does everybody understand isolating? It's like, yeah. I think that there's situations to do it and situations where maybe not to do that, but yeah, it is one of the techniques here. Then we actually, I hate the word overcome because like people don't want their objections overcome, but like I can't think of any other way to put it. Resolve. Yeah. Resolve, say that, yeah. So solution, yeah, we put solution out like that. But now we're talking about like the resolution. So I'm not saying we use a lot of like third-party language. So I don't want to sit here and be like, yeah, the reason you should do this is because that's not an issue, and we have warranties, and we install thousands of homes a year, and we cover everything, right? I'm saying, so third-party language, it makes them a lot more willing to listen and be open and receptive to new ideas. And that's saying something like, the reason, you know, Joanne is actually meeting with us, even though she had that same concern. So you're using someone else, a third party, to indicate like why they're still willing to look at it, right? So you can even use yourself. Yeah, for me, that's why I held off for the longest time. And I do that all the time because I have solar at my house, right? But, or your parents or friend that you know has solar, whatever it is. But it's like the reason, so let's back it up a little bit. This is also partly bandwagoning, which is a really powerful sales technique too. And if you don't feel like you have somebody that you could use for that, use your last sale, right? Or use...
Or you could just say like, the reason a lot of the neighbors are considering this now more than ever. Or
Yeah,
something like
exactly.
that.
Yep. The more specific, the better, but yes, 100%. So the reason that they're even considering this now is because the way that it works is completely different than what a lot of people think, or the way that it used to work in the past, right? When we go out there and install these panels on the roof, we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit because firstly, we don't even know if you qualify yet, but regardless, it's like, if this didn't make logical sense for people, they wouldn't be doing it. And obviously, I'm sure you see a lot of these homes putting up the panels. Everything that is done, it's a federal program. So like we have to make sure that it's all warranted, insured, and up to code. And so this is like, we warranty the wazoo out of everything, and you're covered, right? As far as specifics go, and this is the last part. Anybody know the last part before I say it? Move on. Move on. This is massive and also missed by a lot of people. We'll resolve it. So we'll say, so using the holes in the roof one, we'll say like, yeah, like everything is 100% warranted, and that's why a lot of people are considering this, is because we have extensive warranties that cover everything. That being said, obviously it still has to be up to code. It still has to pass, you know, inspection and permits and all that stuff. And so we kind of, you're double covered on a lot of ways, and kind of has to be that way because it's a federal program. We're required to make sure that you're protected as a homeowner, right? A lot of people, they'll do that. Maybe they'll even execute it perfectly and get the resolution out, and then they stop and they'll be like, does that make sense? So like, you interested? And that just backtracks on all the progress that you just did, because they're just like, no, that sounds good. Thanks for stopping by. Do you have a card? Or something like that, right? Move on immediately. I always say that, you know, you should let the homeowner talk, let the customer talk, and this is true. This is one spot where you don't. Just move on. Move on to what? Well, it depends on where you're at when this came up, but you're moving on to say something like, my job, I always, typically my next thing is like, my job is simple. So like, yeah, it's like, I'm gonna resolve it, and it's just like, immediately, my job is simple. All I'm here for is to see if this would even benefit you guys, and save you guys money. Because obviously, if you're not saving money, you're probably not even gonna consider it, right?
So that's where you want to go, like right after the objections and stuff, is like immediately into getting like the homework and stuff?
Immediately, I'm moving on to something. Typically, when this objection comes up, it would be either at a spot where I can just move on to like the close. Right. So I'm just moving on to be like, yeah, you know, all I need from you is, you know, a picture of your power bill.
That's where I have trouble at. It's like I always get to like you said, I always get stuck at resolve.
Yeah, so that tells me that you just need to learn some ways to actually resolve it, right?
Right.
This is pretty, this is going to be universal on most objections or concerns. Is like, yeah, agree, empathize, ask a couple of follow-up questions on it. You can isolate or not. And then this is the part where you have to have like 3 memorized, and we always say you should have like an objection journal. So like having your notes or a physical copy of like a journal where everything you've ever heard, you have 3 things down pat on how to respond. And that's where you're gonna plug and chug here, right? then move on. So if it's later in the pitch, you're moving on to a close. If it's early in the pitch, then you're just moving on to like a whiff up, where it's, or even building some more pain, right? Where you're saying like, you know, most people are considering this because their bills keep increasing, right? I'm sure you've noticed your bills keep increasing, bills keep going up year after year after year. The reason people are considering this is because it's an alternative to that. You're saving money immediately, and you're locking in a rate that doesn't keep skyrocketing, and so you're protecting yourself against these massive rate hikes, right? All I need from you is blah, 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 blah.
It's embarrassing that I don't have this down. I had it my first week, my third week now I don't have it.
Yeah.
The structure of the pitch. That's where I'm like, once they throw their first objection at me, I just am like, I don't know where to go next. So it's introduction,
Yep.
investigate, build pain,
Yep.
old way, new way,
Yep.
with them.
Yep. Yeah. So old way, new way, with them, a little bit of a pullback. So it's like, hey, you know, obviously, I just have to be straight with you, be transparent with you. There's a chance this wouldn't even benefit you. A lot of people are like, hey, it seems like a no-brainer. What's the catch? The reality is that it may not even benefit you guys, because obviously, if you're not saving money, you wouldn't even consider it, right? You're gonna agree with me. Then it's my job is simple. So my job is actually really simple.
So it was pull back, then set the appointment. Is that
So pull back. My job is simple. So explain. All I need is a few pieces of information.
Yeah, I got that.
We're going to send that off to the engineers. We'll stop by, go over the savings and all that stuff. Normally, do you get your bill online or in the mail?
Pull back
So then
is
get the
before or
information.
after whip them?
After. Yep. Because you can't pull back a carrot that they don't want,
Right.
right? So if you're pulling back on something that they don't want, they're like, cool, I didn't want it to begin with. See ya, right? You want to at least have a little bit of buying temperature before you want to pull something back, because otherwise you're pulling something back that they didn't want to begin with. And they're like,
You don't think the pullback ever like makes what you're saying sound a little bit more believable and credible? Like even if they're not interested?
yeah, yeah.
Because you can say that, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but you can say not everybody qualifies. So the reason I stopped at your house was to see if you even qualified.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Well, it's
right?
just, yeah, to see if this would even make sense for you guys.
Yeah.
I submit, you know, however many reports a week, and out of all those reports that I submit, we typically have like 6 or 7 of those come back as a good candidate for the program. If you're one of those, most people agree that they want to know what it would look like for their house.
Okay.
All I need from you, it's actually really simple. I'm not the yes or no guy. I don't have solar panels on my back. I just need a few pieces of information to submit, and the engineers will do the rest.
Okay.
What was your first name? So this is like a good blueprint that you're going to follow for most concerns. And the biggest mistakes that I want everybody to be aware of is the first one, which is most people jump into this immediately. Don't do that. And then a lot of people don't move on once they've finished. They say, what do you think? Or you got any questions, or does that make sense? Move on to whatever's next. And then this whole section takes a lot of practice. Like,
Could
to
you
be
show us an
real.
example how you would move on from that?
From which one?
Like how we were speaking about the no holes in the roof
Yeah.
and all that. How would you move on? Like what would be your next question?
Yeah,
after
so
that?
let's say I resolve it, and I'm like, yeah, obviously, so I agree, I empathize, I follow up with some questions, I resolve it by saying something like, yeah, the cool thing about this program is that because it's a federal program, we have to make sure that the homeowners are protected, and obviously, good on time? Finish up? 5 minutes? Okay. We have to make sure that the homeowners are protected, and so we kind of go overkill with the warranties and the insurance and all that stuff. That's on us, so that you're not liable for anything. Because honestly, you're right. Like if that weren't the case, this wouldn't make any sense. And they're gonna agree, because I want them to.
Yeah, but I just don't like the look of it.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother one, right? So then we can talk about that. We're talking about holes in the roof. So if that's the thing that they brought up, so we resolve it, and then how do we move on? So. The resolution was, yep, it's warranted, it's insured. We have to make sure that the customer or the homeowner is protected. Otherwise, you know, it wouldn't have federal backing to the program. But that, you know, we make sure that that's the case with everybody. My job is really simple because the reality is we don't even know if this would benefit you yet, right? We don't know if you'd save money yet. All I'm here to do is gather a few pieces of information from you.
Okay.
Right, so that
And then
it's really seamless.
another question from how he was asking, like you create the pain, then you go the old way, the new way, then is the pullback, right?
Yeah. So
When do you ask for the bill? After the pullback? Or
So the bill, you're gonna ask for the bill. That's typically like one of your closes. So when you get near
Okay.
the end of the pitch, it's like all I need from you is a picture of your power bill. That just shows me how much power you use and if you even see enough sunlight to produce that amount of power. Do you normally get that bill online or in the mail? Oh, it's online. Great. Pull that up for me real quick, and then we'll just snap a picture. Right. So that's like nearer to the end of the pitch, and you're just kind of using that as a close.
So you don't have to ask about like the AC, the roof, like none of that?
So that's all done. That's a good question. So most of you guys already know like the structure of the pitch. We went over it a little bit earlier with you guys, right? The AC, all those questions, that's after they've already said like, yeah, I mean, down to see numbers, or I'd at least look into it. You've gotten them to agree that it's got merit looking into. Cool. Once you've done that, now it's like, cool. All I have is a list of questions we just have to blow through really quick. Is there a corner of a table we could sit down at? It'll take me like 2 minutes. And then you step inside or go into the garage or step under the porch, and then you start. So what was your first name, last name? Blah, 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 and you're going through the list.
Okay.
So that's just part of like the qualifying questions. That's done after the whole pitch.
Okay.
Yep. And again, Evelyn, once you get out and do some shadows, you'll start to see, kind of how this all comes together.
Okay.
I know you're short on time. Are we doing this tomorrow as well?
You want to continue?
Yeah, I wanted to continue on building paint. That's really important.
Okay. Yeah, I'm more than happy
Like,
to talk balls.
I guess to specify asking self-realizing questions to the homeowner that makes them realize how bad things they are.
Yeah, we can definitely talk about that.
Like the increase rate every year, how much it goes up monthly, like $25 to $100, something like that, right?
Like building paint.
Yeah.
A lot of building paint has to do with like asking questions though, because we can tell, but telling isn't selling, right? We have to get them to come to that
Telling is
realization.
gay.
So no holes in roof. We didn't really talk specifics on these. Selling house, a lot of times this is a smoke screen. So
But doesn't it bring value to the house?
it does, but I want to find out if this is actually true, because sometimes it's not. So like, oh, that's awesome. When do you plan on selling? Or do you know where you're going?
That's what I had. I had
Right.
somebody with
I have a couple good ones.
$450 power bill, and he was like, "Oh yeah, man, I'm not really interested. I'm thinking about selling the house." And that was before I knew about the 20%
Added
whatever,
value.
like houses sell 20% faster with solar, and sometimes you can see up to 4% more equity on your house. So I think I'm gonna go back to this house today and
Yeah.
hit him with that.
Yeah, the first thing is to determine, is this even real, or is it a
Right.
smoke screen? Are they just making something up? And then if it is real, figure out when. If it's less than a year, probably wouldn't make sense. Walk. If it's more than a year, and they're just thinking about it, then yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, my bill is too low. Is it below $100? If it's below $100, then I'm like, a lot of times I will walk. If it's actually below $100, because that's pretty rare. But even if it's $100 or more, it doesn't matter, because it's like, cool, it's low now. Next year it's going to be higher. The year after that it's going to be higher than that. The year after that's going to be higher than that, right? Obviously, $100 isn't taking food off the table, right? It's probably on auto pay and you're not even thinking about it. But the issue is that, 5 years ago, the people that were paying $100 are paying $350 now, right? So that's why they're considering this, and it's getting so popular. I'm sure you could agree why, it's getting popular. They'd be like, yeah, it does. So it's like, hey, saving is saving, right? I'm not the yes or no guy, that one's just close enough. So, but yeah, we need this is a big one too, is like everything that they can say, we need to have a good understanding of how to actually resolve it. But also, mistake number one, jumping straight into the resolve. We all do it. I do it. And then mistake number two is not moving on once we've gone through everything. So be aware of those. We didn't have time to get into actual practicing it, but we'll keep doing this. I think it's more important because everybody's at a different level, and so it's hard when you have a giant room full of people that are at 0 to 100. So that's why we wanted to do that. But cool. Can you bring the chairs that you brought out? It's 1 o'clock. Yeah, bring the chairs that you brought out, and then somebody grab the white part. So what happened? Please, can you grab the white one? I got you.